And I'm currently retired from the financial industry, but I have done everything from teaching marketing for Lakeland College to I've written 2 novels in the time that I've been retired. Plus I do a number of things for our church, to include a ministry to the nursing home. Now, the selection of history was never an issue with me. I've always been very interested in history and political science and sociology, so that was just a natural fit. And I also had a really good feeling about the history department when I'd gone through orientation and I sat through their presentation. So it was a natural fit. It wasn't hard for me to make that decision at all. Well, I wanted to concentrate on United States history, but as part of that concentration, you had to take a wide range of courses that were outside of the United States history itself. So I started with Terry Wick, and I took Roman and Greek history with him. And there was an experience that was a little different for me because Terry always believed in forcing you to read the original documents and reading original documents and getting set so that you understood the mentality of the period you were dealing with, not just the historical facts. What was the mentality? Why did the Romans do what they did? Why did they build the roads? Why did they set their commercial centers? All of those kind of things. So that was part of what I was doing. The other part, the other thing that happened was, I ran into teachers like Dave Rohn. I ran into teachers like, and I forget his first name, but it was Dr. Morrison, who taught North African history, Paul Mertz, who taught Southern history and actually got me very interested in Southern agricultural history, which is kind of an interesting thing because it ties very closely with political history of the South at that particular time. All of those contributed, I think, into kind of a broad background. And as I mentioned, I think I could tell the extent of my education when I got to the Officers Basic Training Program at Fort Benning, Georgia, when I went through Ranger training at Fort Benning, Georgia, and even to some extent airborne, although that was more physical than it was mental. But you begin to be able to compare yourself against people who came from, Texas A&M, West Point, those kind of things. And I found that I compared favorably. There's really 3 things that I can point to, and then some of them have subdivisions underneath it. The first one is that through my experience with working with history here at UWSP, I learned to do 4 things that were crucial to my career going forward. The first one was collect raw data, how to get data, how to get information. Secondly, how to organize that information so that it makes some sense. Thirdly, how to make and draw some conclusions from the data. And this very clearly came from my educational background, was how to communicate those findings once they were done. And you either did that in business orally or through written reports. So I think that was a crucial part. And it's kind of a process. And it's a process that every one of my history teachers, I think, you get a term paper, it's usually on a subject you're not used to, so you've got to go out and get the data, and you've got to go out and draw the conclusions. I think the second thing is, and I think we miss this sometimes when we think about history, history is a cause and effect subject. And by studying the cause and effect content of historical study, it prepared me to ask the kind of questions in my career that would be important in terms of answering those kind of questions. If I make a change to a product, what's the impact down the road? Now, it's not a rocket scientist thing, and you can get it in science when you say physics. For every action, there's a reaction. And that's, in fact, very true when it comes to product marketing, your distribution sources, configurations of your various networks, that sort of thing. You all have to be concerned with, if I make a change here, what's going to happen here? I introduce a new product, what's going to happen here? And I think history taught me how to ask those questions. Studying history, it's, like I said before, it's a cause and effect in it. So is business, it's cause and effect. I think the third thing was that the broad scope of the historical study of history, and things like Roman and Greek history, Russian history, U.S. foreign policy, prepared me to deal with the diversity that's involved in the business world, particularly the financial business world. because if you're selling pensions, you have to be licensed. Well, if there's a change in the tax law, you have to know that for your pension clients. If there's a change in benefit law, and there had been a number down the road, and unfortunately I can remember HMOs, which that dates me, but HMOs, the various forms of self-funding that came to be back in the 90s, the late 80s, the 90s, all of those sort of things required you to learn what they were, understand their impacts, and then apply them to your accounts, because your accounts are coming to you for the answers. They're not going anywhere else. They're coming to you. They pay you. They expect the answers. So I think that's the important part. And I think, lastly, learning how to learn, which study of history clearly did that, and the teachers I had here at UWSP clearly did that, helped me in my industry education. I'm a fellow of the Life Office Management Association. I hold a CLU designation from the American College. I was Series 6, which is mutual fund sales licensed, and I was Series 7, which is mutual funds and stock license sales. And none of those exams are necessarily easy to get. But I learned how to learn. And I think that's what history, the study of history at UWSP did for me. Whenever you deal with a liberal arts education, you're really, and even the sciences, you're dealing with people, ultimately. And you go into business, what are you dealing with? You're dealing with people. So there's really not much of a separation between them. It's just a question of how you approach what you're doing. You could come out with a history degree and know all the history in the world. Nobody is going to ask you in the business world, when the Battle of Brandywine was fought. Nobody's going to ever ask you that question. However, you will be asked questions about what do you think would happen if this happens. And that process that I talked about earlier, the ability to collect the data, to organize the data, draw conclusions from the data, is going to be helpful along those lines. We're not all that separate. I mean, my financial, the rudiments of the financial industry might be different, but the impact on people is very much the same as the impact of studying history on people. Well, I just recently went through that with my granddaughter. She had a very broad high school experience. Could have gone hard sciences, could have gone math, but her real love was English and writing well, if you want to teach, fine. Prepare to be a teacher. You're not going to go wrong, because business is communications. And if you ever got tired of it, you could get a job somewhere doing communications. And she is a pretty good writer. And that's the advice I give them. You look at my background, there's nothing that prepared me to do work measurement. There was nothing that prepared me in my background, educational background, to do systems design. But I did them because I knew how to learn. And I got that from my college experience. My advice would be this: you can't ignore the humanities, because you can't pretend that human behavior and human beings don't exist. You can always round out. You can take a minor in business and still major in history. I found that my knowledge of history and the processes that it put me through set me up well to learn the next step. The business you enter upon graduation will not be the business you leave when you retire. And mine certainly changed over and over and over again, many times. And you have to be prepared to be flexible. And I think a liberal arts education makes you flexible in the ability to learn things as they come along.